All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Advent, and I am not a financial advisor or a tax professional. While we are going to be going over some tax stuff, again, I am not a tax professional in the slightest. So this is just going to be me sharing my experience and what I know. Please consult your financial professional or tax professional for any questions that you may have. I can only answer of what I know, but again, please consult your tax professional because none of this is tax advice, financial advice, none of that. All right, let me bring up my screen real quick and let's get into presentation mode. Actually, let me do this instead. All right, can you guys see my screen? Sweet. All right, so today is going to keep it pretty simple. Just going to go over like an overview of some brokerage tax forms that you may get. I mainly made this for traders who may be new to trading because if you don't know about none of this stuff, it's going to be a surprise when the IRS calls you and you're like, "Hey, you didn't report some of your earnings," and you're like, "What earnings?" And then there's going to be the tax form right there that you have to give your tax professional. So to hopefully give you guys some insight. Just going to briefly go over some of the more common ones and some uncommon ones. So let's get started. Table of contents, like I mentioned earlier, just going to go over the tax forms that you may receive, what some of their meanings, how they can be generated, stuff like that. And this some last little tidbits at the very end. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a financial advisor or tax professional, and nothing in this class or any of my material is any of that. This is only for educational purposes only. If you agree to this, that I am not liable for any loss that you may or may not incur, you can stay. If you do not agree with this, you can leave. And if you're watching the recording, turn off the video. Moving on. So, what tax forms may you receive? So, depending on what type of activity that you may have had during that tax year, you may or may not receive one of the following or multiple of these tax forms. The 1099-C is one of the more common ones that you're probably going to see when you have a brokerage account. The 1099-C or composite, there's another 1099-C, but this specific one, the composite one, consists of the 1099-B, 1099-div, interest, and miscellaneous. So it'll have like all four of those in one in one file. Now, quick little thing here, as I've mentioned, just in little parentheses, what's going to be there in the next slide. We'll go over a little more details. But yeah, with the 1099-C, you're going to have these four that are listed here. There might be more that gets lumped into the 1099-C. I've never seen any other ones. Just from my experience, I've only ever seen these four right here. There might be a year-end summary, depending what brokerage you have. I use Schwab, and I used to use Thinkorswim or TD Ameritrade, and they gave me a year-end summary as well. So that's what you're gonna find in the 1099-C. 1099-R, this is mainly going to be for retirement accounts, which I'll talk over in a bit. Schedule K1s, mainly going to be if you have like any type of LP or partnership investments. So might be some investments that pay out, like let's say some dividends. Instead of generating a 1099 DIV, it's going to generate a Schedule K1. So there are some companies that you may want to look into if you are going to invest to see if they will provide you with a K1 as opposed to the 1089 div. The 5498, pretty straightforward. Like if you contribute to a Roth or traditional IRA, they'll give you the 5498. It's not required from what I've read and from my experience to give in your tax when you're preparing your taxes. It's just more like informational, so you can keep track of what you've contributed throughout the years. Moving on. So a little more detail for the other ones. Like I mentioned, the 1099-C is a collection of the other 1099s, the B, the DIV, INT, and the miscellaneous. The 1099 DIV, this is pretty much going to show you any dividend income that you may get from any individual securities or stocks, ETFs, and so on and so forth, mutual funds as well. 1099 INT, that's going to be for interest income. Something to note, dividend income and interest income are two very different things. They're not the same. So you're going to get two different tax forms for that. So it could be from fixed incomes like municipal bonds, CDs, treasuries, so on and so forth. If you have a high yield savings, you'll get the 1089 INT or INT, but from your bank. So the brokerage version and the bank version are different. Something to keep in mind. I believe it generates the 1099 INT and even the DIV if I think the threshold is $10. So if you make $10 or more in interest or in dividend income, it'll generate these forms. Again, consult the IRS website and your tax professional for exact data. 1099B, pretty straightforward. This is what most, if not all of us are going to be getting. Essentially, it's going to be like any realized gains or losses that we made from selling securities, trading options, and any other taxable events that may happen in our taxable accounts. So might generate from your individual brokerage if you have that. If you have a retirement account like an IRA, capital gains and interest or dividends are not, it's not a taxable event, so you're not going to get a 1099-B for those accounts. So just keep that in mind. 1099 miscellaneous pretty much just reports like royalties or substitute payments. I might have gotten this like once. I think my second year of trading. I've been trading for almost 5 years now. I don't really remember what was on it, but something to keep an eye out for. Let's move on. 1099-R. These are essentially going to be forms for retirement accounts. That could be a 401k, IRA, whether it be traditional, rollover, SEP IRAs, Roth IRAs, so on and so forth, annuities and some other type of retirement vehicles. One thing to note, these are generated when you take distributions from the accounts. Again, from my experience, if you take any distributions out of these accounts, you're going to get a 1099-R. Sometimes, depending how you transfer the funds, I'll give you guys an example. If I do an ACAT or an electronic transfer from, let's say, Fidelity to, let's say, Schwab, which I ended up doing, I don't believe, from what I remember, I could be wrong. I don't believe Fidelity gave me a 1099-R because I didn't actually make a distribution. It was just a transfer. But if I were to request a check from Fidelity and then put that into my Schwab account as a direct rollover, Fidelity would give me a 1099-R because that was a distribution. It wasn't in it like a direct rollover or a direct transfer. Information that you guys probably don't need to know, but just good to know in general. Usually, more of the older generation may opt for checks. Not sure why, but electronic is easier. And some brokerage firms or financial institutions don't allow electronic transfers. They will probably do like checks instead. So something to note. Moving on. Like I mentioned earlier, the Form 5498 is just going to give you information on the contributions that you made that year. It's not necessarily, again, in my experience, it's not required when you're filing your taxes. It's just good to have for you and your tax professional to know what you contributed and see if there may or may not be any deductions that you can take depending what type of contributions you're making. 1099Q, This is more so would be to any parents or anybody that may have custodial accounts for your children or, other family members that may apply to these situations. So if you have like an ESA or a 529 plan, and any distributions from these would generate a 1099-Q. I don't have any kids or I don't have any custodial accounts for my nieces or nephews, so I've never gotten one of these. So if you are a parent and or anybody honestly that has one of these type of accounts for any of the siblings or anybody younger that you're a custodian over, you may want to, do some research here. The Schedule K1, pretty much another tax document that reports income, loss, and dividends for a business or financial entities partners or an S corp shareholders. Like I mentioned earlier, like some investments do generate this. I personally find it annoying to wait for these to generate because they generate a little later than the other tax forms. So I had an investment, I think 2021 to 2022, and I've had to wait like 2, 3 months to get this, which was annoying because I'd rather file my taxes sooner than later. So I got out of the investment because I didn't care to wait for this anymore. But again, that's just me personally. Some people don't mind. If you pay your tax professional, hey, let them earn their pay, right? But other than that, pretty straightforward for that one. Uh, Anything else I want to talk about these? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I mentioned to you guys, not going to be a long class. Some last little bits of information, like I mentioned. This is just my experience and what I've experienced myself personally and things that I've studied. So if you do want more clarity, the IRS website has all of this information and everything that they require of you. If you have a tax professional, definitely ask and talk to them. Whatever brokerage firms or accounts that you have, like for Schwab, you can go to the Learning Center and they'll show you, they'll give you information, right? So, if you go to Schwab, if you have Schwab, if you have Fidelity, Vanguard, they all have their own section, but I use Schwab. So in the Learn section, tax planning, they give you, more information about all of these things. So, the resources are there for you to educate yourself. So always good to know this information. Like I mentioned, a lot of these things here may be unique to your situation. Like I got a 1099-R when I took some money out of my 401k in 2020 or 2021. But obviously, I'm not going to get one anytime soon because I'm not going to take anything out of my retirement accounts or IRAs. So a lot of these things may generate based on your unique situation. So again, just be mindful of that. Brokerage firms typically send these starting in January. Some may come later. Usually in February, you get all of them. One thing to note, if the if the company or the investment decides to update the, let's say the reporting, so let's say if they messed up and there was a qualified dividend payment that they didn't actually notate properly in their system, you'll get a corrected 1099. So generally for me, at least from the last 2 years, I've been waiting a little later to file my taxes just in case there's a corrected 1099 because I'd rather not go through the amending process and dealing with all that stuff. So something to keep note of. As always, you want to keep all these records. So if you want to, look for data back 5 or 10 years, or if the IRS ever calls you like, hey, we have a discrepancy 15 years ago, can you supply the documents? And if you don't have that, good luck. Brokerage firms usually keep data from 7 to 10 years, depending who you have. I know Schwab keeps records of up to 10 years. So you definitely want to keep your own records of all of these things just in case. Uh, yeah, the brokerage, whatever brokerage you have, you're more than welcome to reach out to them for any. Well, let me be specific. You really want to t contact your tax professionals because firms are not tax professionals. So if you call them, they're not going to give you tax advice. They might give you information, but they're not going to give you tax advice. So you definitely want to talk to your tax professional. The internet's here, a lot of information out there for you to educate yourself. So that's pretty much it. Like I mentioned, not going to be anything too crazy today. Do you guys have any questions? Put it in the chat, come off mute, whatever you want.
So basically, you're saying that we'll like if we're obviously investing, we'll usually receive these tax forms on from the brokerages, whether it's long term, short term, from the brokerages. They're always going to be generated in their statements and tax forms, correct?
Yeah, so let's
And
say,
once you get those, then you'll give it to your professional.
yep, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good.
And it'll label as well, like what's short-term gain, what's a long-term gain, things like that.
But now the question is, even though they should be truthful, how do you pick a good CPA? You know what I mean?
That's a great question. Thankfully, I've never had to deal with that because my dad is a CPA, so it just makes it easier for me.
Oh, look what you just did. You just made your dad rich, man. 'Cause I'm sure everybody on this chat wants to meet your dad now.
Let me know. I'll send you his info when we get
Most
off.
definitely. Most def.
So, you know, you can ask your tax professional if they have, like, if you're trying to find a good one, if you do trade, you may want to ask them, like, have you had experience filing these types of forms for other individuals? Because, if you have a tax professional or a CPA that only, let's say for the sake of the conversation, if they only help people with like W-2s or like if they're contractors for 1099 for 1099s, they may not have experience with these types of brokerage or trading forms, right? So you want to really work with a CPA that has this experience if you don't want any issues down the line.
Yeah, I'll definitely be contacting your dad. Definitely. Even though the live trading journey kind of just started, but I've been demo trading for a little while. So now it's gonna be the real deal, you know what I mean?
100%. And you definitely want to make sure you file your taxes because the IRS is always going to want their cut. Unless you live in Mexico or in Puerto Rico where you don't have to pay capital gains tax, IRS is going to be calling you.
Uncle Sam wants his piece, man.
My first, I think it was the first, yeah, my first year, I made, I think, like half of what I made at my regular job. And I was blown away. I'm like, I have to pay taxes? I have to pay you guys instead of you paying me?
Unbelievable, right? You generated more freaking wealth in the economy. That's crazy.
So that's a good thing, though. I'll get people like, oh, I don't want to trade or make extra money because then I got to pay taxes. I'm like, if I'm gonna make $100,000 extra and I just got to pay the IRS 30,000, I'm still pocketing 70K, right? That's 70K that I didn't have on top of whatever job you work, right? But you know how it goes.
Bingo. Bingo.
So yeah. Anybody got any other questions? Any comments? If not, we'll wrap it up in 2, 3 minutes. For those who got here late, I'm gonna upload the recording to my YouTube. Since the video is pretty this short, probably gonna put it up by 10 p.m. Eastern, so an hour and a half. Of course, Coco. Sweet. All right, looks like we don't have any other questions. Appreciate you guys for coming out as always. Any questions, my DMs are always open, or the comments
Buddy,
for the people who watch.
appreciate you, bro.
Of course, man. Akimo, we'll talk. I'll text you in a bit when I finish up here.
Most, most definitely.
All right, have a good night, everybody. I will see you guys on the internet.